Good afternoon. I think my mic needs to be taller than me. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Madison. I'm Teresa Holmes, Club President. Thank you all for joining us today. Today's meeting is sponsored by Tom Fox of Connect Search LLC and Nick Curran of Numbers for Nonprofits. Our thanks to them both for their support of today's luncheon. Since we don't have our keyboard today, we will recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, for which it's visible, for liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our guest will now be introduced by Becky Steinhoff.
Well, we have two guests today, and I think the rest are over at the Inn on the Park. But we have Mary Stroud. If you could please stand when I call you and stay standing. Mary Stroud, the guest of Rob Stroud, and Jennifer Hoagie, the guest of Ashley Quinton Powell. Welcome to our club. Thank you.
Maybe some of the guests did what the president did today for the Strategic Planning Committee meeting. I went over to the park as well, but maybe they'll catch up. Thank you, Becky. As you know, I have been going out into the community to bring Rotary some visibility while I share information about our club within the community. A few weeks ago, I shared a brief segment of me at the Concerts on the Square event. One of the individuals I met that night is with us today. Would Lyle Banks please stand? Lyle is Vice President and General Manager for Morgan Murphy Media, which includes News 3, Channel 3000, and Madison Magazine. Our media classification has room for growth, so we hope to see Lyle again at a future luncheon. Thank you for joining us today, Lyle. Steve Goldberg, chair of our Manfred Swarzinski Humanitarian Service Award Committee, has an announcement.
This is true, I do. I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about the Manfred Swarzinski Humanitarian Service Award, which was established by this club in 1982 to honor the memory and the life of Rabbi Swarzinski, who was not only a longtime and much-loved member of this club, he was a model of bridge building and humanitarian service, and he was also my rabbi, so I got to know him as I grew up. And his sense of humor, his sense of humanity, just very contagious. He was such a bridge builder that the clergy in Madison, the priests and ministers from other faiths, called him Madison's finest Christian. He was such a bridge builder that Edgewood College established a chair of religious studies in his name. He was such a bridge builder that Madison Magazine named him one of Madison's most influential figures of the 20th century. And it is after this man that we have named the Humanitarian Award. If Rabbi Swarzinski were alive today and at this meeting, Maria, he would say he's very interested in your presentation about the immigrant's experience, having made his own brave crossing from Nazi Germany to escape the Holocaust during the 1930s. He would also be pretty excited to know that we already have some fabulous nominations for the award. And there are 9 days left. Friday, October 1st is the deadline for any additional nominations. And I encourage you to search your inventory of friends and others who are volunteering at nonprofits that you care about, where you think they might be worthy of this kind of recognition. And you can find the nomination form online on the club website. And with the award comes a $2,500 donation from the Madison Rotary Foundation to a nonprofit selected by the honoree. So keep your eyes open. We've got until Friday of October 1st, next week, as the deadline for the nominations. Thank you so much for helping us honor somebody in this community with an award named after a former Rotarian who definitely lived a life of service above self. Thanks so much for your help in this process.
Thank you so much, Steve. Maggie Porter-Kratz is a member of our Community Projects Committee, and she also has an announcement.
Thank you. We have a lot of projects coming up this fall in the community projects from the Community Projects Committee, and we're hoping to get a lot of you involved. This Saturday, we still have some space for volunteers at the River Food Pantry. We're looking for four folks to come help us volunteer. So if you have some time, it's from 8:30 to 10:30. Please let the office know. This year, as we talked about last week, instead of doing Socktober, we're doing Soaptober. Of course, October is right around the corner. The weather changed right on cue for us. So we're going to be collecting toiletries through the whole month of October for Porch Light. Collecting toiletry items, of course, helps bring dignity to the primarily men and also families who are part of the Porch Light programs. We need full and travel-sized toiletries, and we'll be out in the hallway back at the Park Hotel every week during the month of October. So you can bring something every time you come or one time. You can also drop off items at the office throughout the month of October. To make it fun, we're also going to have a happy hour on October 21st, October 21st from 4 to 6 p.m. over at Jenna's. Last year we did that. It was a small but mighty crew, so come on out, have a beer, and help do good. We're also, in October, we're also participating in the Rotary International Climate Challenge. So we're going to have 2 work days in the Yahara Heights County Park, where we are going to help distribute prairie plant seeds. So that's October 7th and October 14th from about 1:45 to 4 p.m. So it's a great way to get outside and help our community. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Maggie. Melanie Ramey is leading our meeting sponsorship effort, and she also has a quick announcement.
I actually have 2 announcements today, but they only gave me time for one, so come back on October the 5th for the second. The announcement I want to make today is in reference to something that has happened in the last year. A few weeks ago, we gave appreciation and thankfulness to Jason Barron and Brian Baskin for the fact that they made us be able to have our club meetings virtually throughout the pandemic. And we showed our appreciation to them. And as some of us were talking about what had happened in the last year, we thought that it was actually quite amazing that we have ended up virtually unscathed as a club. We've been able to continue with our community grants. We welcomed a new class of Rotary Scholars. We did our youth awards. We had our weekly meetings. We had our weekly newsletter. We had the committee meetings of the club, and we even sang for most of the time. And so as we thought about this, we thought, how is this possible? And then it dawned on us it was possible because of the work of our administrative staff. They had continued to work throughout the year, and while many clubs, service clubs of all kinds, actually just discontinued operations through the pandemic, we kept going. And because we were able to keep going, we have been able to continue our place as a vital institution in this community and doing all the good things that we do. And so in thinking about this whole situation, the past presidents group decided that we needed to address the issue. And so they have prepared a consensus resolution that I would like to share with you now. This is a consensus resolution in appreciation and support of the administrative staff of the Rotary Club of Madison. And it reads, "Be it resolved that the undersigned past presidents wish to make known the following. Whereas we highly value the dedication, loyalty, commitment, and professionalism of our administrative staff, Patricia Jenkins, Jane Coster, and Sharon Mimiat. In all of their interactions with us through the years, they have carried out their duties in a highly professional manner in carrying out the values and the mission of Rotary. Whereas during the past 18 months of the pandemic, they have worked to ensure that the club has maintained its services to members and its important contributions to the community, and when many clubs have discontinued operations. And whereas in her more than 29 years of service as executive director, Patricia Jenkins has continually hired outstanding staff members, ably supervised and championed their growth to the great benefit of the club, and demonstrated her exemplary leadership through the collective work of the club. Whereas Patricia Jenkins has been recognized as a leader by the other large Rotary clubs in the United States, bringing favorable attention to our local club. Therefore, be it further resolved that we wish to express our strong appreciation of the entire administrative staff and stand ready to support them in any way they may need to continue their tenure in the Rotary Club of Madison. This was signed by 29 members of the past presidents group, and I would invite you now to join with us in confirming this resolution for the staff. You see, they're so busy working, they don't have time to stand up. I will tell you the resolution has been printed and framed, and a copy will be given to each of the staff members.
Thank you, Melanie. Janina Rourke is chair of our Rotary Youth Exchange Committee, and she also has a quick announcement.
Hello. So if I could see a show of hands, has anybody in the room been an exchange student before? Awesome. Keep your hands up. Does anybody, have they hosted an exchange student? Great. Wonderful. So look at all the people in this room that have touched exchange students, whether it was someone in your own family, someone that came in and became your family, or yourself. Rotary International had to shut down youth exchange a year and a half ago. We sent children home, we brought children home. It was a little bit of a crazy situation, and we've stayed closed for the health of the children and not knowing how we could operate youth exchange. But our district and our clubs have been going through and looking at how to stand the program back up, and we will be standing it back up as of July next year. So what that means is we can restart the summer short-term youth exchange for next summer, and then also have our long-term exchange students starting to come back in for next academic school year, and sending our Madison students out. So what I need from you is help in getting the word out to students in your family, in your community, in your network that might be interested in applying to Youth Exchange, because the deadline for getting applications with all of the visas and country assignments, everything is actually it's coming in December, and then for the summer exchange, the deadline for that comes shortly thereafter in January of next year. So if you have anyone that you know of, or if you would be willing to be a host family next year for a student we bring in, please contact the office, reach out to myself, or look in the newsletter. I'll have some information in there in one of the upcoming newsletters. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. A quick reminder that there is still time to register for tonight's Rotary District Vibrant Workshop. This event runs from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m., and you can participate by Zoom or join us in person at Godfrey & Kahn's office, at the Godfrey & Kahn's office located on the Capitol Square. Our own Michelle McGrath is actually leading this session. We'll be hearing from Terry Street, who has over 25 years of experience with higher education, curriculum development, diversity and inclusion, as well as advocacy, education, and youth leadership development. She'll provide a high energy presentation, and there will also be some interactive breakout sessions. There was a link in the Tuesday email from the Rotary office, or you can contact the Rotary office to get the link if you'd like to register for tonight's event. So I hope you will all join me in this opportunity to connect with other Rotarians in our district. Our program committee is continuing its new series as a way for our members to become more connected to other leaders in our community. We have a monthly series titled Conversations with Community Leaders, where we feature leaders who are new to Madison or who have a new role in our community. This month, we are going to hear a brief interview with the new UW Athletic Director, Chris McIntosh. We're also inviting the person to our luncheon when we show the video so members can have a chance to meet and say hello to the person. But unfortunately, Chris wasn't able to be with us today, and so we hope to have him visit at a future meeting date. Let's now watch the 4.5-minute video interview of Chris, who was interviewed by our program committee chair, Regina Milner. And our thanks to Neil Farbach for recording and editing the video for us.
Since we've already been introduced, I'm going to jump right into asking you a question about changes in athletics, not only here at Madison, but across the country.
Well, Regina, that's the topic du jour, change. You know, as a student athlete here at Wisconsin and as a player for Barry, you know, a long time ago, Barry's mantra was embrace change, and so that's what's in my DNA, and there's plenty of it to embrace. If the change were limited to just a change in leadership here at our university and our program, that would be significant. As we emerge from COVID, there's another layer of change on top of that. The social climate and social justice issues of the last year have brought with it a tremendous amount of change. Now, name, image, and likeness, which took effect on July 1 and will allow our student athletes to commercialize and profit from use of their name and image, is a monumental change in college athletics, decades in the making. And then a Supreme Court decision on Alston, which questions the NCAA's authority to limit compensation or reimbursement on educational expenses, and that's a imperative decision that when all of those things intersect, I think it really calls to question the purpose and the mission of college athletics in general. But I'm optimistic that it will allow universities like ours to reaffirm our own value statements and value beliefs. And first and foremost, for us at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, it's about education, access to education, and competitive excellence. And those two things, for decades here at Wisconsin, have been hand in hand, have not been mutually exclusive, and I think it's an opportunity for us as we go forward to reinforce those things.
The emphasis on academics when you're recruiting students. You want to speak a little bit about that?
Sure. You know, our academic tradition here, tradition of excellence, of its importance in the student-athlete experience, of the lifelong, lifetime value of a degree from the University of Wisconsin has become a differentiator for us in recruiting. It's not been a hindrance for us. It's been another tool in the toolbox to attract talented young athletes in all of our sports. And I think we've shown throughout the years, throughout the decades really, that Wisconsin is a place where you can attract talented young people that have a desire to seek a degree from a world-class institution and compete on the biggest stage. And those two things have worked hand in hand now for years, and I think are an advantage to us.
There's going to be change here at the football stadium. Do you want to talk a little bit about our view right here?
Yeah, so right over our shoulder, and I'm not sure if you can see the scaffolding that exists at the moment, but after we're done playing the last home game this season, we'll break ground on the South End Zone project. And that is change. It's obviously a change to the physical structure of Camp Randall, but it's also indicative of a change in consumer behavior and fan interest. And really, Camp Randall hasn't been equipped with open air premium seating opportunities. And so this is a reflection on what our fans have told us that they would like through our fan advisory groups and our surveying. And so the South End Zone will be completely rebuilt in a way. It'll have 4 levels of premium seating opportunities. All of it will be open air so that fans can experience the energy and excitement of Camp Randall, but also a different level of service as well.
Thank you, Mac. This has been very informative. We very much appreciate it. And again, congratulations on a very difficult new assignment. And please do well. We look forward to seeing you in the future.
Thanks, Regina. Great to see you.
I'm enjoying those almost as much as I'm enjoying the Traveling with Teresa series. All right, we have birthdays to celebrate with a bit of humor or wisdom that complements our Rotary mission. We also encourage members to make an age-appropriate gift to the Madison Rotary Foundation, rounded up to $100 for our Club Synergy Scholarship Fund. If you are in the room, Rotarian, please stand. September 20th, Ann Lucky. September 20th, Greg Zakarski. September 21st, Carla Tanis. September 22nd, Londa Dewey. September 23rd, Bridget Frazier. September 23rd, Alan Korenzinski. I failed on that one, didn't I? They will remember this in the bloopers at the end of the year. But Alan says, as he shares a quote from Justice Felix Frankfurter, "When in doubt, do right," to which I would add another quote by Richard Goodwin, assistant to Presidents Kennedy and Johnson. "When in doubt about what is right, do what you believe." Thank you, Alan. September 23rd, Peggy Les Crane. Okay, I think I'm being set up today. Les Crenier. Did I get it right? Yes. All right. September 23rd, Anna Moffitt. September 25th, Bill Haight. Thanks to our celebrants for their contributions to the Madison Rotary Foundation. Casey Okers will come and lead us in singing happy birthday.
Let's do the Stevie Wonder one, okay? So if you know it, shout it out. Ready?
Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday, Rotarians. Awesome, awesome. All right, where am I? Oh, I'm right. Okay, good. All right, so members in the news. A bit of members in the news from last week. Tim Conroy was interviewed on NBC Channel 15 about Capitol Lake setting up a COVID vaccination booster clinic later this fall. Janine Cullen Schultz was pictured and quoted in an article titled Secrets of Success, How to Make Your Way in a Male-Dominated Industry in Brava, September-October 21 issue. Greg McKellis was pictured and quoted in an article titled In the 608, Beyond Books, Madison Magazine, October 21. Now on to today's program. Our speaker today is our very own Maria Alvarez Stroud. Maria has made a name for herself in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. She was CEO of a local nonprofit serving the elderly and their families. Has also been a management consultant and business owner, and she has been a producer and executive director within public broadcasting. Maria, as I said, is also a member of our Rotary Club. Writing has been central in all three of Maria's past roles. She has had articles published in industry publications, toolkits, brochures, and national presentations. Maria's production credits include scripting and production of live shows, specials, and one-hour documentaries. Most notable is Safe Night USA, airing on PBS that won the prestigious PBS Outstanding Communications Award and Gabriel Award. Today, she is going to speak to us about the book she recently published titled Brave Crossing, A Journey in Between. Our thanks to Mystery to Me Bookstore for attending our meeting today to sell copies of Maria's book for those who are interested. We look forward to your presentation, Maria, and we have made a contribution to the Rotary International Polio Plus Fund as a way to say thank you for speaking to us today. I also want to just mention that we will have a Q&A session at the end of Maria's speech, and if you are going to have a question, please wait for the microphone. Let's now welcome Maria to the podium.
Thank you, President Teresa. Can you hear me back there? I just want to make sure. Good. Okay, great. I have to say, you know, I've been in Rotary a long time, and I've seen speakers say often that they're really very happy and feel honored to be up here as a speaker. And I have to say, member or not, I feel the same way. I've also heard them say how nerve-wracking it is. And it kind of reminds me of when I first wrote my book. I felt a bit overwhelmed. I was like, where do I start? What do I include? Especially with the 20-minute time frame here. But I'm happy to be here, and I'm going to just dive in because I really hope we do have some time for Q&A. So this is, The Brave Crossing is a story, an immigrant story of a young man, an immigrant coming in the early 1900s. That young man happens to be my father, who was born in 1895. And so it is an immigrant story. He was a Spanish Filipino coming by himself, not speaking hardly any English, at a time where he went in Chicago, there were hardly any Filipinos or Spanish Filipinos present. So I'm going to dive right in, and I'm starting with this slide in part because I've always, for many, many years, I've been an avid reader of historical fiction, of historical novels. I love it because it takes you to a place and a time period that you might not know about, but it can help you really understand what life was like at that time. In diving deeper into my father's story, I also learned that it can really be a window into our present. And in a lot of ways, hopefully as you listen to this presentation, you'll get the same sense that wow, this was 100 some years ago, but how is it reflecting in how we are today? So I'm going to really be focusing on the history as well. He was Spanish Filipino, and again, this is the pictures of my father at different ages, Ricardo Luanzo Alvarez. He was my father. I dearly loved him, but to be honest, I really never got to know him very well. When I was born, he was 58 years old. My mother was 44, and I had 6 siblings, one 22 years older than me. I have to say, I never really got to know him very well either. When my father died, I was 22 years old, and there was 20, and there may have been more. My family is so large, I don't know if that's exact, but there were 20 grandchildren already in the family, and I just have memories of all these little kids running around after me when I was growing up that were all related. He was a very quiet man too. He never talked about his journey, so I didn't know about his struggles. I didn't know what it was like to come to a country that was going through many different, many catastrophes were actually going on at the same time, which we'll talk about. And the only thing he did share with me is that when he was in Chicago, he went to the University of Chicago, and I was studying Spanish. I was in 8th grade, and he told me the story of how he failed English 2 times in a row. And I don't know if that was supposed to inspire me or scare me not to do the same thing, but it's something I remember. Where he came from was, again, the Philippine Islands. For those of you who don't know, there's over 7,000 islands in the Philippine Islands. He grew up on Luzon, the largest island. The circle represents the city or the town that he grew up in was Santa Cruz, Laguna. When he grew up, again, telling about his father was a Spaniard, first generation coming from Spain. He looked not Filipino. He probably was a foot taller than most Filipinos, and he looked very Spanish, as you probably saw my father did too. He's not the typical look of a Filipino, even though he was a mestizo. He was born again, as I said, in 1895, and a year after he was born, life changed. He grew up in Santa Cruz. He lived right off of this square. He lived with his father and his mother and his siblings. Down the street was his Lola, his grandmother that he spent lots of time with. He was very close to. She lived across the street from the Catholic Church that she supported her entire life, and in fact was considered a saint because, as you'll hear, she needed to rebuild that church after the wars. And I guess that's where my father's life began to change and really make him the man he became. This was the beginning of the Spanish-American War. And I know if you're like me, I have to say, Spanish-American War, wait a minute. I think of Mexico, I think of Puerto Rico, I think of, not necessarily the Philippines, but actually the first battle of the Spanish-American War was in Manila Bay in the capital of the Philippines. And that war lasted 3 years. It was a war that I'm sure they would have lost, the Filipinos, if the Americans didn't join them. And they joined them saying, we are going to fight with you so that you can have your independence from a 300-year period of time where they were ruled by the Spaniards. But when that war ended, that was not the case. They clearly stated, no, you're not ready to rule yourself, you're not ready for your independence, which then sprung into the next war, which is the Filipino-American War. Now, for my family, again, I mentioned earlier that my grandfather looked very Spanish. Well, so does my father, who was very, very young during these wars. And they were in a precarious position because my grandmother was very much a leader in the community. She had soldiers, American soldiers, she really supported. She wanted to have their country become independent. But during that war even, there was this sense of who is the enemy and who is not. And that was very, very true with the Filipino-American War. Imagine soldiers who had been fighting together against Spain were suddenly fighting against each other. Filipinos didn't know where people stood. Were they with the Americans or with the Filipinos? So it was a really different kind of war. It was more of a guerrilla warfare. In both of those wars, and predominantly in the second, my family, like many, many clans, that were Filipino, hid in the hills. That was for their safety. They needed to take care of their families, and they didn't want to be caught in the crossfire. And particularly given that my grandfather looked so Spanish. That war, again, was very different. And of course, my father was then 7 years old. He wouldn't have known that what would come next, which was an outbreak of cholera, which again was very devastating, not only for my family, but for many Filipinos in the Philippines. I have to look and just see where I'm going. I guess the point about the one headline that I want to make sure that everyone understands is that they were denied their independence, and that was the belief by not only many Filipinos, but many Americans. So there was a lot of controversy over the whole issue of independence or not. No surprise, when he was 20 years old, he boarded a ship for the United States. And that was through the prodding of his Lola, saying, you need to find a place where you really can find where you can belong and not be worried. He had fallen from grace as he was growing up. You can guess that at one time he had a privileged position, looking very Spanish, and that certainly changed for him. When he got on the ship, he also quickly learned that it wasn't going to be easy to fit in. There were people, he traveled in first class quarters. Most Filipinos were in steerage far below. And he was being treated differently. Some believed he didn't belong in that position of first class. When he arrived, in fact, at Angel Island in California, he wanted to turn around and go back. He had doubts about, should he even be trying to do this? Like many immigrants of color, there was this question of how am I ever going to succeed in this world? He was marked down. There was only two choices when deboarding. Was he white or was he black? He was written down as white, and yet when he arrived in the country, he was feeling very much in between, which I think is a theme for most colored people coming to this country, with that sense of being in between. I want to I'm not going to keep going on just this story, but I want to point out three themes. For me, they were ahas or surprises or whatnot, but three themes that were very prevalent. And I have to say, when I was researching this, I didn't know that the topic of race was going to be so prevalent. It just showed me my ignorance of not only of the Philippine Islands, the history of them being ruled by Spain, but also of our own country, what it was like in the early 1900s to arrive, especially when you didn't have a community. So most Filipinos who came to America in that time period stayed in California. My father was convinced to come to Chicago by another first-class quarters Filipino, saying, no, you can come with me to Chicago, where he lived. At that period of time, when he went to Chicago, this is a typical picture of what it looked like. It was filled with lots of, Germans, Polish, Irish, no one that really looked like him. In fact, the records show that in 1910, in a population of 2 million people living in Chicago, there were 128 Filipinos. Now, then fast forward 10 years to 1920, that figure went above 300, but the population did also grow to 3.5 million. So again, just to give you a sense of, he didn't walk down the street and see anyone that looked like him. So, the word brave was something that I knew had to be in the title all along, because I think he was very, very brave. The same thing that was happening was the Great Migration. And, at that time, There were some African Americans, blacks living in Chicago, but they were actually being heavily recruited to come when the World War started in 1914. That was going on in Europe. We were providing many supplies and whatnot. So in the industry, they were looking for people to come and fill positions. So I just want to read the one statistic. By the end of 1919, Chicago's black population grew by 148%, with over 100,000 now living, and this is exactly what a historian said, mostly in southern Chicago, many of them in old, dilapidated housing and without adequate services. And that comes up in the quick future as well. Mexicans were also pretty prominent in Chicago, and they actually had been recruited as well. And they were recruited in part because they were known for being hard workers, and because they were so loyal to Mexico, there was an assumption that they would return to their country. They still have that reputation of being really hard workers today, if we all know. And then the science of eugenics, and we could spend a whole lot of time talking about the eugenics, but the politics of the time, and this actually was, that science was started at the University of Chicago by a professor of zoology. And again, I'm going to just read what the notion was stated by a historian. The notion that these ethnic groups had less intelligence, and again, I'm talking about primarily the migration, and as well as the number of Asians coming from Asia. These groups have less intelligence, were less physically fit, or had a propensity towards criminality. So again, a lot against the folks that were coming at this period of time, the new immigrants. Of course, then in 1919, and I think everyone knows about the race riots, the Red Summer, the Bloody Summer, and this was something that I paid a lot of attention to in my research because I knew my father lived close to that neighborhood. I knew what my father looked like, and I also did a lot of reading about how, yes, it was between blacks and whites, but those in between were caught in the middle often. Several were killed, many were injured. And the numbers of that time, 38 people were dead, and this is in a period of 13 days in Chicago. 537 were injured, and suddenly 1,000 black families were homeless and needed to find new places to live. At that same time, and this was my big surprise that I didn't know anything about, was there was a resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan. Does everyone, I mean, I know we have historians in here, but that was, if you want to raise your hand, is that a surprise? In Chicago, there were actually 30,000 strong in that, in the Ku Klux Klan. And they weren't just, again, aimed at blacks, they were aimed at Catholics. They were aimed at the Jewish people. So it was, in Chicago in particular, it was a very difficult thing. My father did end up going to Milwaukee. He was in the medical program at that time it was called the Medical School of Wisconsin, now Marquette. And they had 20,000 that was a membership. Now in Milwaukee, they weren't as hardcore, I'll put it, but they wanted to scare people. They wanted to tell them that they didn't belong, they shouldn't be there. So again, it was another reality of that period of time. Let's fast forward 100 some years. And I guess that's why that first slide means so much to me. It's hard. No, we don't talk about the Ku Klux Klan today, but we do certainly talk about the Proud Boys, the Boogaloo Boys. There's a gazillion different names. In doing my research, I just was curious, like how many white supremacist groups do we have in the United States? In Florida alone, there are 72. So again, bit sobering, and I don't want to have it be so serious, but I think these were the challenges that not only my father faced, but immigrants of color coming to our country in the early 1900s. So the topic of class, and I'm not going to talk a long time about this, but I duly noted when I was writing and doing this research that my father was fortunate. He came able to support himself because of his family back in the Philippines. He had received education back in the Philippines. He also was able to live in quarters that he could have more interactions with other people in different classes. I just wonder, if he wouldn't have been in that circumstance, how would he have fared? Would he have become a doctor and had a practice in a small town for 48 years and was well loved? I wonder. So the question I have is, what kind of play do we still have about race and class going on in our country? And then, of course, the catastrophe. And I guess the catastrophe of our time that we're still facing, again, in our time, is the pandemic, then called the Spanish flu. It's frightening to think about how that was 100 years ago. It's wonderful that we now have better care, and we have such medicine that wasn't there at all in that period of time. But the similarities, when I think about this period, are also similar, in that there was a president in that time, President Wilson. He wanted everyone to be excited about the end of the war, World War I, which was an amazing thing. But at the same time, soldiers were coming home and bringing that virus with them. And the numbers, I think if you've just heard recently on the news, we've now surpassed the number in the United States that have died from the disease. And so we're not obviously through what the pandemic is all about. And just to say that it's just something, again, that is this something that's bound to repeat itself? I'm hoping not. I want to end on just a little bit more of a positive note. Prohibition was also another thing that was going on at that same period of time. My father was in Marquette. I'm convinced that's where he learned to love his beer. The mayor, I love this quote that he had, that the mayor quoted, "Prohibition is a big joke. If someone wants to find a drink, they will find a drink." And yes, there were many, many speakeasies, as well as the German population had their own private parties that were happening all throughout Prohibition. So just to go back to the beginning, I think it's worth again thinking about 100 years ago and what was life like then compared to now, and how are we really doing? How are we really doing with race and class, and how are we handling the issue of the pandemic? I think for me, my father was defined by all of those things, but in particular the pandemic. I believe that is why he was going to medical school when that was hitting, and he saw firsthand. So I'm pretty convinced that's why he became a doctor. So I think that's it. I hopefully left time for questions. Thanks. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Jason. Hey, Maria, are you still in touch with family in the Philippines? And if so, what's the relationship like both ways?
Yeah, I'm. Thank you for asking that, because I didn't mention about my father being Spanish. He married into a very illustrious clan, a Filipino clan that is thousands and thousands. Doing research for this book, I went to the Philippines twice, but I've been 2 times previous as well. Thanks to the technology, I'm friends with many of them. I've participated in memorial services via Zoom of relatives that have died. I actually got to meet the historian. We have a coffee book table about our clan in the Philippines, in fact. And we remain close. It's really wonderful. When I was growing up, my father's sister came to visit, her daughter and uncles came. So there's always been a relationship. I just never knew anything about it when I was growing up. And so if I can encourage one thing, boy, learn your history. I found out who my father was, and I found out in part who I am and answered some of my questions about how community has always been so important to me. And I watched my father, do house calls for $10, 25 miles away. And I'm sure it influenced me, but now I understand that's what he came from in the Philippines. So thanks for that question. Guys are so quiet. Well, there's another one.
What kind of documentary record did your father leave? Did he have diaries, letters, and how could you reconstruct his life?
Through a lot of research. I'm glad you asked that question, because this is a book that's written in epistolary format. So what that means is it's all journals, letters, telegrams, notes, and they were, I constructed those. I wish I could have found some letters, but it required me really doing my homework about his relationships with people, how they interacted. I had to learn exactly when did telegrams become available to the general public? When was there electricity? When, so it was a lot of research. And, with historical novels, you want it to be probable. You don't want it just to be possible. You want it to be very probable. So everything that was written in the novel is very much probable. I wrote it in that format and used that format, though, because I wanted you to feel like you were walking in his walk, which hopefully, if you read it, people feel that way. I'm looking at some people because I know they've read it.
Hi, Maria. Thank you so much for that story, and I really look forward to reading your book. My grandparents were also recent they were immigrants, but we're all most of our relatives were immigrants at some point. And so I think do you have any ideas about how to really drive that home with people that, unless you were Native Americans, you're an immigrant. Some of us weren't volunteered here, but that's really an important story, I think, to tell. And I don't know if you've ever been asked a question like that, but I sometimes think of how do I share, I have maybe was 2 generations, and you maybe had 10 generations, until you came to this country. But how do you share that kind of knowledge that we really are all immigrants and there should be an acceptance of that fact?
I asked that same question within my family. Again, we're a huge Catholic family. I mean, I have, I don't know, probably 35 nieces and nephews. I have, the next generation, there's probably more than that. And it can so easily get lost. So I have that conversation with my nieces and nephews about the importance of understanding the roots, because it's so easy to go us versus them. It just is, and it is. I see that in my family. So I know the one program that has probably helped us address that issue is on PBS, and I'm spacing on the name. Can anyone call that up? It's where the gentleman helps them, people, finding your own roots. Thank you. Gosh, I worked at PBS. They would be really embarrassed. Yes, yeah, Professor Gates from Harvard, that's right. And it's a wonderful program, and I think it's helping people realize that knowing what your roots are. My only problem with the show is they only do famous people, and I wish there was a way that we, people like you and I that are just trying to live lives of value, how we could get that across to people, how important it is. So if anyone has an answer to that, I would love to hear it myself too.
Hi, Maria. Thank you for your presentation over here. Just one quick question for you. I too am a lover of historical fiction. Would you be willing to share with the office for distribution your top 5 or 10 historical fiction books?
Oh, yeah, and you can actually go to my website. And because, again, that's my way of saying, this is a great book, this is a great book. I do have a list, and I can give that to the office as well. I also have a newsletter. If you're a lover of historical fiction, I'm doing it on a monthly basis. I know that will become less, it will be more periodic, but I always make recommendations on books to read and then do a bit of a review, because it's hard to find a book that, you know, I always look for recommendations, so thanks.
We are adjourned.